Thanks, Heather. It's great to be here. Michelle, do you want to say a few words about your background before we get started?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I am here in Bedford, New Hampshire, working at Single Digits, and I've been here for a year, and I'm very pleased to be asked to join here today. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining. Just so you know, our plan for today is to basically go over a few slides just to give everyone some context on how job hunting right now digitally can feel a little bit different than what we're used to, and then really transition to a more dynamic program where you guys can ask a lot of questions, find out a little bit more about what's happening in the marketplace. Michelle's a great resource to talk about the HR perspective. And then as a recruiter, over the last 8 years, I've helped hundreds of local companies. I've helped thousands of candidates get through the interview process. And I've kind of had a front row seat to the big changes that have happened with moving to a digital process where, a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, it was still very much a hands-on and face-to-face interview process. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now and go through some slides. Bear with me just for a second here. All right, looks like it is not showing correctly, so hold on just a second here. It's showing up on my second screen, which is not what we're looking for.
It did come up quickly, Shannon, and then went away. You
Okay.
had it, and then all you needed to do is just put it into presentation mode the first time around.
All right, let's try that again. Thanks for the help, Heather.
That looks good. And then just presentation mode and we'll be good.
All right. And how's that looking?
Once you just put it in the presentation mode, so at the bottom, your the little screen icon to make it full screen so we don't see all the other slides.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Hold on just a second. Sorry about that.
And if it's too much of a hassle, it's fine. We just see the slides on the other side.
Yeah, I'm just getting like a present in Teams and then
right on the go to your right where your volume, the bottom right corner.
Yep.
And then the square icon, see your volume. Right, yeah, there you go.
Thanks for the help. I appreciate that.
No problem. That should be it. It's not clicking. It's hard for me to see through because it's like tiny on my screen.
All right. Yeah, it's clicked, so I don't know what's happening here.
Okay, don't. Oh, that was the thing.
That was not what we're supposed to be doing.
No, make it a little smaller.
All right. Sorry, guys. We'll have to stick with it and kind of roll with it here. I appreciate the flexibility. Technology, right? We're still getting used to it. So what I did was I broke it down to kind of 5 different factors that I think we should all think about as we're considering a remote job hunt. So breaking it down a little bit, research, review, prepare, interview, and offers. So making it simple, but I think it is really daunting when you start to think about job hunting. And we used to be having, operating a little bit within the confines of where can you drive to? What's a reasonable commute? And now we have the opportunity of looking jobs at a national and potentially even international level. So how do you do that? First step here is research. So where can I find jobs? And, obviously the answer is online. But what does that mean? I think that taking a look and finding jobs that are within your industry can easily be done on LinkedIn. It's kind of an obvious answer. But one thing I really like to suggest is to look at individuals that are posting jobs because they're encouraging you to come join their team. So it's one thing when a corporation has a job posting or it's more of a traditional LinkedIn job post. But if you see people that you know that are already in your network sharing jobs, that's a great place to look. How do I know if these companies are any good? That's a tough question. normally, you may be able to ask around, you may have a colleague or a connection that works at the job already. But when you're looking at jobs on a national scale, how do you make that decision? So I think that one thing you can do is look at the history of people that are at the company. So when you're looking on LinkedIn, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit of what can I learn from LinkedIn, but you look at the longevity of people that are on the team or in the position. So if you're seeing that a team has had a lot of turnover, that might be a question to ask in the interview process. It doesn't necessarily mean that the company is going through issues or that it's a bad position, but it is something to think about. Glassdoor. It's kind of, I call it like the Yelp of jobs, right? Where you're more likely to complain online than you are to put out praise. If you go to a restaurant and have a terrible experience, the chance of you taking out your phone and complaining is a lot higher than if you go out to a restaurant, you have an amazing meal with a friend or family member. You're not going to take out your phone and be like, wow, that was the best meal I've ever had. Quite the same way you will if you're aggravated or disappointed in the experience. And the same goes for Glassdoor. It's a lot easier to hop on Glassdoor when you're disenfranchised with the company, you're upset about things, and just to blast the company. If you love your job, you're more than likely not going on Glassdoor to say, wow, this is the best place I've ever worked. So take Glassdoor with a grain of salt. And also when you're looking at a Glassdoor review, especially if it's negative, look through where that position might sit in the company to see if that would be an applicable critique for your own job role there. Maybe a sales team has a lot of turnover, but you're going in as a software developer and that team is very stable. So take that with a grain of salt. How do you know if it seems too good to be true? Again, I think doing some due diligence and really looking through company culture pages, looking through reviews that you find online, reading PR notifications that the company may have put out. And again, looking at longevity of the people that work there. I think that's one of the biggest factors because happy people stay in their jobs. And then lastly, can I still network remotely to find good opportunities? And the answer is absolutely. You should take the time to try to meet with folks, look at people and connect with people that have similar job titles than you or might be a hiring manager for someone in your position and make that connection. So those are all different ways that you can approach the research portion of your job hunt. Secondly is review. So there are a few things that we want to review when you're starting a job hunt. The first is your resume, then LinkedIn, and lastly, your technology. So resume. We want to look to make sure your resume is up to date. So you don't want to have old companies on it that, maybe you don't have your most recent business or your most recent position. So just make sure that it's a good snapshot of where your skill set is the exact day that you're sending it out. Do you have keywords pertaining to the job? Well, that's pretty important because a lot of companies are going to use different software systems that will scan resumes specifically for keywords. So take the time to look at a job description and making sure that the job you're applying to, you have those keyword matches. Comparing your resume to the job posting. HR and internal recruiters and external recruiters are super busy people. So making your resume as applicable to the job that you're applying to makes their job easier, which means that your resume gets passed through faster to hiring managers. You may know what you do very well, and the hiring manager is also going to know by looking at your resume, but there's often a step in between, and that HR person may not completely understand your technical depth based on your resume alone. So make it easy on them. Make sure that it's clear and make sure that you're really speaking to the job that you're applying to. And is it dynamic? Do you have specifics? Do you have metrics where appropriate? So making sure that it's not just bland keywords that I'll say responsible for blank, but use new adjectives and definitely use numbers whenever possible. With LinkedIn, have you updated your headshot? I think it's important in the digital world that your picture is going to reflect the person you see on LinkedIn will be the person that shows up in the interview and not something that's completely outdated. Does your work experience align with your resume? This is a big one that almost all hiring managers are going to check. They're going to look at your LinkedIn, and if your resume says something different from your LinkedIn, that's a pretty big red flag. Do you have a digital presence? So, Yes, you still will be Googled. So make sure that anything you have that's public out there represents the way you'd want to be seen in a professional nature. And then lastly, have you bragged? Did you include awards, recommendations, appropriate extracurriculars? All of those pieces have a role on your LinkedIn page, and it's important to paint the whole picture of who you are. And then lastly, technology. Do you have a good web camera? How is your audio? How is your lighting? And are you familiar with common tools that will be used in interviews like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and Skype? If you're not, ask someone to practice. Ask a friend, a colleague. A lot of these options are going to have free tools that you can try out, and that way you feel more comfortable when that interview happens. Moving on to prepare. So great. You've done an excellent job getting your resume ready. You've reviewed all of the pieces, and now you've sent your resume out. It's time to prepare for interviews. Reviewing your calendar and planning for PTO or flex time is really important here, because you're going to have times that work on your calendar and that don't for you to schedule interviews. It's really important to give yourself enough time for the interviews, so that way you're not squeezing it in between meetings and feeling panicked if the interview, which is going great, is running late and now you're missing something important for the job you're currently doing. So think through it. Maybe you have to plan for your car to go in the shop or a dental appointment, but just start to think through that process. Familiarize yourself with the company through their website, career pages, press releases, and through Google search. Know who you're talking to and ask for an agenda. Almost every time you'll be able to get the information that you need just by asking. So if you say, great, I'm so excited to interview at your company. Do you have an agenda on who I might be speaking with? That gives you the opportunity to take a look at those people on LinkedIn, maybe find commonalities, such as people that you're both connected to and know well, or college in similarity, or the nonprofits or things that you have listed might be able to give you some good tapping points. Eliminate distractions. So if you've got kids or family members that often come into your office, make sure that they know that you've got an interview and it needs to be non-negotiable. No one can come barge in. And also try to pay attention to what you may have going on for external noise. Have a glass of water and your resume on hand. And then lastly, pre-plan some interview questions. 100% of the time after an interview, the client will say to you, so what questions do you have for me? And it's really important not to panic and say, nothing, I think you answered everything. What you want to do is have some questions pre-planned and written down so you don't have to think of them on the fly, and then ask those questions of the interviewer at the end. So we're all digital now, and I think the challenge can be, how do you build some rapport and credibility through your screen? So in this slide, you'll see that I have two different options for backgrounds, and I think both are completely fine. One piece that I do want to share, though, is if you're looking at the picture on the left, you can see that this worker has a probably smaller space, but she's well set up. She's got a nice desk with her monitors. She's got plants and natural light, and it gives the interviewer the confidence that she's well set up to work remotely. If you look at the picture on the right, it's just a standard background that you can get anywhere. With that background, it shows, okay, yes, I understand I should be professional, but it also gives you no character or no context to the person behind that screen. Also, I don't know about you, but the halo that comes around when you're using a digital background can drive people crazy. So I think it's important to look at your space and be able to show a genuine space of where you're working. Another piece of building rapport is that question, how are you today? And it's almost always the answer, pretty boring and expected. Doing well, how about you? And I challenge you to think through that. That question is going to happen every single time you log on to an interview. And to come up with maybe a more dynamic response that feels genuine to you. Something like, my day's going great. With the weather getting warmer, I took my dog out for a walk. Or, thanks for asking, my day's going well. I listened to a really interesting podcast on France this morning. It got me excited to travel again. Or, it's going great. I just brewed a new blend of coffee. It's delicious. I try to support local roasters. Are you a coffee drinker? Now, that is going to elicit a conversation and not the response, oh, I'm fine. By doing this, you're opening yourself up to create a more memorable experience and a more genuine experience with the person on the other side. In the digital world, it's so easy to hop into meetings and forget that there are people on the other side of the camera. We don't need to be professional all of the time, in the same way that when you used to walk into an interview, you'd be asked the questions of, "Hi, so-and-so, can I get you a cup of coffee? Can I get you a water? Did you find the place okay?" All of those questions are missing when we're dealing with a digital transaction. So we want to use this opportunity to actually build some rapport and talk to one another on a human basis before we get into the nitty-gritty. So the post-interview and offer stage. So great news. You've done a good job with your interview and you've had the opportunity to answer your questions. You've asked the right questions, and now you're in the post-interview stage. So some things you can think of is be sure to connect with those that you've interviewed through LinkedIn. I encourage everyone to take the time to write a short but specific thank you note. And this is where that rapport comes back in. If you're able to mention something that you talked about, then you can include that in the thank you note and they'll remember you again. Review your reasons for leaving your current role. I think this is a really important piece to really reflect on post-interview. So before the excitement of an offer coming in and all of those pieces, but to really think through why you're looking. Are you looking for growth? Are you looking to get into a different industry? Are you looking for the opportunity to move into management? Maybe you're looking for less responsibility, but to really think through why you're leaving your current position now before you're in the exciting phase of getting an offer. And then also start to prepare yourself for an offer. Really have a concrete answer to things like, what is the salary range I need to be in? What is the PTO or core working hours I might need for my job to be successful for me? What are the benefits? And ultimately, what's my start date that could be a potential for me? So congratulations, or not. How do you handle the end of an interview process? I think that this is an important piece too. We'll hear one of two answers: thank you, but you're not a fit, or welcome to the team, here's your offer. When you hear the negative answer of thank you, but you're not a fit, remember to be gracious. It's easy to be disappointed, but thank the interviewer if you have the opportunity to, because you'll never know what other roles are in the company now or in the future. Maybe you weren't a good fit for the job that you interviewed for, but they have another position that you could be an excellent fit for. Asking for feedback. Was there something that you missed? Or maybe you just didn't have the right skill set or certification you can go get, and that way you'd better align yourself for that position next time. Keep in touch. You're going to remember them more than they remember you. So feel free to follow them on LinkedIn. Stay connected with the individuals that you interviewed with. Maybe congratulate them as they move on. Maybe you had a great experience meeting them. You weren't a right fit at company A, but when they moved to company B, they'd be excited to have you on their team. On the flip side, welcome to the team. Here's your offer. What steps should you take then? Negotiate. Every HR person is expecting a negotiation, and it's much easier to negotiate now than later. Understanding benefits and specific requirements. So things like your healthcare may not start for 90 days. Is that something that you're able to handle within your company or within your personal life? Asking questions about the onboarding process. What can I expect for equipment to be shared with me? What is the training process look like? What will my days look like for the first couple weeks? That will help you understand if it's going to be the right role for you. And if they have a confusing or non-defined onboarding process, that might be a red flag too. Maybe they're not familiar with hiring remotely and you plan to be 100% remote. So helping dig into those questions ahead of time can end up for a lot less frustration when you start the position. Review the offer carefully. And like I said, ask questions. And then when you give your notice, you should plan for a counter offer. Hiring is really difficult right now, and hiring managers are really much more inclined to try to keep the people they have than try to find new ones. But the problem is the reason you started the job search is still going to be there, even if they give you a counter offer for more money. So if you're unhappy with the job or you feel you don't have growth potential, maybe you don't like your boss or coworkers aren't the right fit anymore, those reasons will still be there even if you accept a counteroffer for more money. And frankly, if they're giving you more money the day you decide to leave, they should have been giving you more money when you were there already. And then lastly, I just have a few tips as far as some HR interview tips. Again, be prepared and do your research. Understand the role you're interviewing for and key areas of your background that can apply. Communicate. It's your interview too. So if you need different interview times, if you have questions about the interview process, if you need an agenda, just ask those questions. Sometimes hiring managers or HR professionals can be moving so fast, and we do this so often, that it's easy for us and we forget that maybe it's your first time interviewing in a couple of years and you really need some help through the process. Be consistent in your answers. So don't tell one interview one thing and another interview another. They're going to get together for feedback, and then they'll be questioning why you were inconsistent. Show your personality. Don't speak poorly of former positions, managers, or companies. This is a huge one. It almost will always get you eliminated from a position because if you're complaining about your former position or former managers or company, then you're going to complain about the next place you're at too. So it's a big red flag, and oftentimes companies and interviews will just move on from you completely if they hear you speak poorly. There are ways to give critique about your former position, managers, or company without sounding like a jaded former employee. Use examples and situations when answering questions. Have answers for common questions like, why are you interested in this role? Or what interests you about XYZ company? Those are questions you'll be asked almost every time. So you can plan ahead and have those answers thought through and detailed. And that way, when it's asked in an interview, you're already expecting it and you've got a good answer to come back with. Understanding your strengths and weaknesses. I think that, you will still find companies that will ask you questions around strengths and weaknesses. So planning an answer that you're comfortable with is a good idea. And lastly, don't assume they know what you do in your current role. Just because the job title might be the same as the one you're applying for, every company approaches their positions differently. So don't assume that they know what you do any more than you know exactly what they do when you're looking for an interview. And now I'm going to open it up for questions and stop screen sharing. Thank you for putting up with my display here. I'm sorry that happened. And I will open up for Michelle and I to answer some questions.
You do have a couple of questions automatically that came in, Shannon. Let me scroll back through here. So Carrie said that she heard from someone that sending a thank you note can come off as desperate, which she doesn't necessarily agree with, but she wanted to know if you had any suggestions to avoid people thinking that. And then some other people had some chatter in there saying, well, I didn't find that to be true, but she wanted to see if you had any suggestions.
Do you want me to answer that one, Shannon?
Sure.
Okay. So I think every hiring manager has a different opinion on this. I personally think it shows that there's an effort, right? You are thanking them for their time. It's a consideration and a politeness thing. And it shows your interest in a role, right? If you have an interview and then nothing comes, a manager might think, and I do work with managers that say this all the time, well, I didn't get a thank you note. Should we move them ahead in the process? I really liked them, but I didn't get a thank you note. So I think it's a small thing that goes a long way. And something else that I think can be interesting with thank you notes, I ran into this situation recently. We were interviewing for a salesperson, and when I was following up with the salesperson after he spoke to the hiring manager, he said, I think I missed the mark on this particular thing. And he went on and he explained it. And I said, why don't you put that in your thank you note to him? Tell him, you know what, I sort of stumbled on this one question, and I want to explain why. And I didn't tell the hiring manager, but the candidate did go ahead, explained himself in a thank you note, and the hiring manager came over to me and said, look at this guy. He took accountability for something that he knew went a little bit sideways. And I'm really happy he sort of put it out there and was able to say, I kind of screwed up here in the interview, but I want you to know why I got so caught up on that question. And we ended up hiring this person fairly recently. So I think thank you notes can serve many purposes.
And just to add on that a little bit, if you're interviewing with multiple people, don't send the exact same thank you note to them. Don't copy and paste and just change the name. Interviewers will talk amongst themselves, and if they all got the exact same interview note, it really takes away from the genuineness that you put behind it. So, take the minute to write a few sentences to each person that's individual.
Some more questions, ladies. What is a good question I should ask a hiring manager?
I would say if you're going to be working for a hiring manager, you probably want to know, what do they do to motivate their team? What is your everyday life going to be? You personally may like to be managed in a particular way, and you'd like to hear from them, like, how do they see themselves as managers? What are some of the reasons that they joined the company, or what are some of the reasons that what are some of the reasons that, oh, I'm sorry, not reasons in the word. What are some of the things that, keeps them at the company? What makes them happy? What helps them to want to push through every day and continue the grind at that company? I think those are some things that I would want to know from the person I was going to be working for.
What is the best way to start job hunting when you're changing careers and/or industries?
So that's, that can be a tough one depending on where somebody is in their career. And very often people struggle with making a career change because of the financial, situation there. I think, again, depending on where somebody's going, if you have the opportunity to gain some experience, whether it's through volunteer or, networking situations, like this, where somebody might be able to start networking with people and gaining some understanding. But I think, Shannon really hit it on the head. You have to research. There's a YouTube video for everything now, right? So if you don't know how to use Teams or Zoom, jump on YouTube, and in 10 minutes, you're going to be, you're going to have it nailed. So do as much as you can to try to show that, you've done some research here, but at the same time, be humble, right? You don't know all the answers. You're a resourceful person. You will, figure out a situation. If you're given, a project or something that you need to do, you may not know all the answers, but you're going to be resourceful enough to go and try to figure it out. And you just may need a little guidance around the way, but showing that you're not just going to sit back and wait for somebody to give you, here's step one, here's step two, I think is going to help as well, to be honest and talk with people, the hiring managers.
Yeah, Michelle, I love that you said the hiring managers. I think that that's such a piece there, where if you were trying to transition into a new position or a new field, your resume is not going to match a job description. And if you just fire it into applying for jobs, you're not going to get the traction that you want. So looking through and approaching people in the position that you want to be in. So if you're trying to move into project management, connect with some people on LinkedIn that are in project management and try to get a relationship with them, maybe not a job with them, but understand better what they do. And they may have referrals for you and say, you know what, Michelle's this incredible person. She's had this really great job. She's been a software developer for the last 10 years and she wants to move into project management. Here's why I think she'd be great at it. To have someone be able to advocate for you a little bit internally can really go a long way as well.
That curtails into a question that came to me about, it's similar. So if a job requires more experience than you currently have, but you feel like you really can step into the role, how do you explain that?
Yeah, it's tough. So when I'm looking in an ATS system and I'm reviewing resumes for a particular role, I do first look at a resume. And if I see something that catches my eye there, but maybe doesn't look quite right, I do go back and look at a cover letter, right? So if I think a candidate has the ability to, maybe wear their heart on their sleeve a little bit and put it into a cover letter and, say something like, this looks like an exciting opportunity for me. I may not be the perfect fit, but I've got drive and I'm excited and I know I can step up. So sometimes a lot of, every HR person is different in how they approach, reviewing resumes. So this is just my style, but I say put it in there, right? Be human, be humble. Um, you know, Something Shannon said in her presentation is don't be fake, right? Show your personality. I truly believe chemistry is so important through the interview process, because if you're not getting that just in an everyday conversation, you're not going to be happy when you have to start working with all these people on a daily basis. It's not going to feel good. So um, I don't know if that answered your question, but I hope that that's helpful.
Thank you. All right, Lexi has a question here. She says, I feel like in this new era, longevity is not as long as it once was. What would you consider to be a red flag? Would that be shorter than 2 years?
If I saw that somebody had less than 2 years at 5 companies in a row, I would probably not take a very close look at them. But if somebody has 3 years, 4 years, and then there's a blip in the middle there with less than a couple of years, I would still consider that. I would look at how many of those short stints, as I would call them, does somebody have? Is it that somebody just can't get past the year and a half mark at 4 or 5 companies in a row? Or is it that, look, life happens. Sometimes we get into a job, it's not a good fit for whatever the reason is, and that's okay. Own it and just move on. But I would say 2 years is a good amount of time where I would think, oh, okay, they spent 2 years there. That's decent. It's not 6 months, or 8 months. Shannon, do you agree with that?
I do. I think that, yeah, longevity is definitely changing, and moving around every couple of years is getting more and more common. I think that from a job seeker's perspective, if you take a look and the entire management team has been there for less than a year and a half, that's something to ask questions about. Clearly, they're going through a big transition. Maybe that's exciting. Maybe that's something you're really into and you love to be at that ground level of change. Or maybe you like stable environments and that scares you. So I think that taking a look at, and it helps in ask the interview questions, right? So if you see your hiring manager started 18 months ago, it is a great question to say, what made you come to this company? I see you started 18 months ago. Or how was your transition into this company? Because that's going to give you some insight as far as the process. And I think that, again, looking at different departments, if there was turnover of a manager and then turnover of half the team, that's fairly common because a new person comes in and things change. The group feels different. So it just taking a look. It's not a hard, fast, like 18 months or bust, but I think that red flags can be seen when you look at longevity overall in a company. The same way if someone's been, a company has been, every single person's been there for 25 years, that also potentially could be a red flag that you'd want to ask questions about.
Good point. So Linda says, she asked, I am older than most people applying for junior/entry roles. How to best navigate this? And there was a few votes on that.
I think I would probably need to understand a little bit more why somebody who has more experience is applying for a more junior entry level role. Is it because they are making a career change? Is it because they've been out of the workforce for a little while? Or is it simply because there's somebody who is looking to take a step down, maybe on the back end of their career, which I see quite often, right? They've done the VP thing, they've done the big manager thing, and now they just want to come in and do their job and be an individual contributor, for the next 5-10 years, whatever that might be. So I would say, again, try to put that into a cover letter to explain, please don't pass me by because you might think I'm overqualified, or, because this is why. And we see that, we see it a lot. Again, I just would have to maybe understand a little bit more specifically about why the entry level role. But I guess just explain it in a cover letter so that somebody at least gets the opportunity to read it and not just pass you by.
And to add on that a little bit, I think also cover letters are great, but they don't come through in every applicant tracking system. So there is always like a summary spot or an objective spot on your resume. You can put it right at the top and just say, after 20 plus years of high level positions, I'm seeking the opportunity to control my piece of the project 100% and be an individual contributor. And I look forward to being that for your company. I think applying context, and then it is tough because you don't want to hide all the experience you have, but you don't necessarily want to highlight it either without explaining what your intention is.
So just to clarify, so you, Michelle, basically what you're saying too, that's the importance of the cover letter, because a lot of these questions that you've been answering is like, put it in the cover letter, put it in the cover letter. So it really hones in that you need to have a cover letter, right?
Well, I think Shannon's point is really good there, where maybe it's in the summary at the top that says, kind of explains yourself, because it's hard when somebody's just looking at a resume, right? I definitely have just passed by people that are too senior for a role, but I do try to look and say, if I'm looking for a salesperson and I see that somebody's been a VP of sales, well, was it at a small company with 30 people where it was probably more of a title than an actual true VP of sales that they might have had at a much larger company like an Oracle? So I do try to see through that, but it's hard when you're just looking at a resume. So if you do have the ability to put some kind of a little, like Shannon said, a little bit of context as part of kind of a summary line at the top, it's helpful because it helps to explain it versus just being passed by because you're too senior level with your experience for that entry level role. It's a hard thing, I think, because we are just reviewing resumes and don't actually get to see the person behind it.
And I just wanted to, because I know you can't see the chat, from your perspective, Lexi just followed up in the chat just saying, thanks for the answer about longevity. I was asking from the job seeker's point of view, but as a former military spouse, I'd like to advocate for hiring managers to take a second longer to look at resumes where the applicant may be moving every year. That's a really good point.
It's a valid point. I have seen resumes, it's not very common, but I have seen resumes that have noted why somebody may have left a role. It may have said laid off or had to relocate or something like that. It's not very common, but I have seen that before. And it is helpful, although it does, it's not the norm on the resume. And it is hard when people are just reviewing a piece of paper, right? It's hard for somebody not knowing the backstory with people, but it's a valid point for sure.
So Carrie said, I started at a fully virtual firm in October 2020, and I just recently added 4 more attorneys. Any suggestions for helping employees to feel connected in a virtual business? Currently doing weekly Zoom team calls and individual calls. So coming at it from the lens of, you just hired your virtual team. How do we help with that?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge trying to engage people that are 100% remote. A couple of the little things that I've done, and sometimes I feel like it's a lot of the little things that make a difference versus the big things. We've played Cahoots within Teams, which is an online game. We do kind of Fast Friday trivia where it gets opened up to everybody, and the team has the ability to come back and be a part of it, making sure that there are I don't know, all hands or town hall meetings where remote people are getting information so that they can see the bigger picture. It's hard. Little gifts, sending out, whether it's a gift certificate or if it's an employee branded shirt, or even just a simple thank you note. Sometimes being mailed to somebody's house goes a long way. I keep them in my drawer here. They're single digits branded. And when somebody, does something that sort of strikes a chord with me, I try to just do a handwritten note. I drop it in the mail. And it's a little thing that I think how often do you get nice stuff in the mail anymore, right? Maybe you get a Christmas card here and there, but usually we get bills or everything is online. So it's a small thing, but I think it's a nice little touch. But we have to be creative, and it's not easy for sure. And the bigger the team, the harder it gets to keep everybody engaged.
And to add on that a little bit, I think it's very easy when you're doing digital meetings to like jump in and get down to business instantaneously, right? Everyone's joined, we're ready to go, but it's different than when everyone used to be in office and it's someone's grabbing a coffee or someone's going to do this later. People are chatting on their way into the office, the conference room about a vacation they're taking, those pieces. So I think that gets really lost, and that can help, that dilutes a culture a little bit and dilutes bonds between people. So I think not being afraid to have a little bit of time built into meetings to have like true conversation about what did you do over the weekend? Do you have any fun plans for the weekend? Do you have any favorite recipes? Just non-traditional ways to kind of have people engage and talk through. Maybe it's like, I'm having family over and I need a recipe for lasagna. Does anyone have an amazing one? Those conversations used to happen in our regular day-to-day interactions at the coffee maker, those pieces, and they don't happen anymore. So encourage those to happen online.
Yeah, that's a great point. I actually, when you said that, it reminded me at my last company, we used to have kind of a coffee clutch that was there in the morning, and it was that water cooler talk. And we actually scheduled, I'm not sure if it was every Friday morning or every other, but we just did a half hour and we invited everybody. And it was not any kind of a company meeting. It was just chit chat. What's going on with you? Oh, my kids are selling Girl Scout cookies. Oh, send me the order form. Who doesn't want Thin Mints? And it literally had nothing to do with business, but people joined if they could. It was a half hour, but it gave them that sense of being able to have the water cooler chat.
You brought that up because the month after COVID happened, that's what I started doing. I started, that's what I called it, a water cooler chat, and it's a Zoom, and I sent it out to a bunch of people just for 20 minutes every other week. And I just said it was optional and anyone who wanted to come. And that's exactly what we do, just to have those, hey, how's life type conversations, what's going on. It's been fairly successful, so it's good. Okay, we have a bunch more questions. So Linda wanted to clarify in here. She says, where'd she go? So she is starting a new career, and she's not 24 anymore. So she's just has some concerns about that, starting a brand new career. Any advice?
I say be confident and go grab the bull by its horns, right? Especially if you're not 24, you you can do it. You have good life experience, and again, be humble but confident. And you have this. I don't have any doubt that somebody that's making a change, that is aware of it, that awareness is the biggest point, versus somebody who just goes out there and doesn't recognize that they're starting something different.
And I think the fear from the hiring manager perspective when it comes to, taking on someone that looks way overqualified is the person going to leave the job quickly? Are they going to get another job that they're making more money? So I think that getting ahead of that, if you do get to talk to someone, is really important to say, like, my goal here is to develop in this new field. My job is I do not want to go back into the field I was in before. I want to do this field, and I'm ready to start from the ground up. And that's my intention. I think that we get afraid to talk about money. We get afraid to talk about longevity in interviews, but like, that is what the fear is from the hiring manager. So if you know what their fear is, try to get ahead of it and talk through it. It can only help you. And then network in. That's my other piece when it comes to trying to change careers. So if you can get an internal referral from somebody, it's going to be a lot easier for you to get in front of the right people. So go through LinkedIn, try to network with people through events like this, schedule coffee meetings with, even virtual coffee meetings with people that work at the companies you're interested in, and be specific about why you want to go work at that company. So it can't just be like, well, I saw a posting for a junior web developer and I want to move into web development, so it's good enough. It's like, no, you have to look at the company and give them, and any person that's hiring or trying to find a job, I encourage this, but, give the feedback and get ahead of what the concerns might be from the other side of the desk.
I have a question that came in that was a follow-up to what you had just mentioned before, Michelle. When you said go in and be confident, the person asked, how do you figure out where the cutoff point is between coming off confident versus egotistical?
Yeah, that's a fine line for sure. I know I've said this on so many occasions, but I remember back to one of my first jobs, and I worked for the CEO, and he said, we need to hire people that are hungry, humble, and smart. And that is something, those are words that I live by all these years later, right? So, it's hard, right? So it's that balance between believing in yourself and showing that you're resourceful and that you can take on new things and you're excited to take on new things without saying, I've got all the answers and you don't have to worry and I've got this, right? So it's a delicate balance. But I think if you're having a heart-to-heart conversation with somebody, they can see you. Body language is so important, which, is great in a video, but it's also not as good as it is in person. You have to be a little bit more vulnerable so that, the people that you're talking to can see the soft piece of you, right? We can interview for skills, accounting skills, technical skills, interviewing skills, but it's harder to get to the soft skills, right? Are you driven? Are you motivated? Are you resourceful? Are you able to think through a situation logically? And so as much of that as you can show in this kind of a one-on-one or video setting, those are the things that are going to set you apart. Shannon, do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that really identifying what you have as soft skills that are transferable and to be able to articulate that is going to be really important in an interview process.
One of the questions I very often ask when I interview people is, describe yourself in 3 words. And it's something that catches a lot of people off guard. And I always get, that's a great question. And I'm like, well, I kind of know that, but that says a lot about people. Like, what are the top 3 things that they came up with? And it's also specific, to the role that somebody's interviewing in, because I'm looking for different things depending on the role. So I very, very recently have been doing a lot of interviewing for high-level salespeople. And I'm looking for things like, I'm an overachiever, I'm a go-getter, I'm hardworking. I'm looking for the drive in a salesperson. But if I'm interviewing an HR person, I'm looking for a whole different profile and a whole different 3 words of what we're doing. But think about that and try to portray those, those characteristics as you're talking through situations, in your interviews.
I have a question. So if you're on the hiring manager side, and now with our new world we're living in, and maybe you're hiring positions that are fully remote, that never were before, and you have legitimate concerns about people who've never worked remote before, they're used to being in an office. Are there certain questions you should ask or things that you should be concerned about to make sure they're actually doing their job? You know what I mean? And they're not doing laundry, while they're working.
In the pre-COVID world, it's something I dug in on a lot because it wasn't, it was common to some degree, but not as common as it is today. And I would ask, did they go into an office? Did they work at home? Did they have a space at home? Like, did they have a regiment or a schedule, right? Some people get up and don't ever get dressed and they just roll from one room into the other, or maybe they bring their laptop to their bed. But there are people that will say, I get up, I go down to Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts every morning because that's how I kind of get my day started, so that I feel like there's some separation between 100% work at home and what it's like to sort of have that schedule. I get up, I take a shower, I get on the treadmill, I go get a cup of coffee, and then I sit down at my desk. Or like, so I try to get a feel for how do they have the separation between, remote and office, or, how do they get their day started? Is it all just one long marshmallow that's squished together? So those are some of the things that I, try to get to. It's not something, honestly, I dig into much anymore, because I think for the most part, most people at this point have now had at least some number of months working at home.
I think the other thing you can do as a hiring manager for that is to check references. So by talking to someone that they worked for before, if you can find someone they worked for in a remote capacity before, you can ask questions about how was their availability? Were there any issues with missing meetings or not being available when team members need them? You can ask questions around deadlines, if there's any issues there or issues with collaboration. So there, I think that doing a little due diligence on asking some of those remote questions and a reference is always a good idea.
Martha asks, how do you get better feedback than it was close, we liked you, but went with someone else?
That's a tough one, because the company could be put at some liability if you give them too much information and somebody doesn't like the answer. It's tough. I mean, you can ask, you may or may not get that feedback. I've got to be honest there. I do try to tell people what somebody else might have had or why we went with somebody else, but it's not always possible. It is sometimes a chemistry thing, right? The hiring managers just, you meet people and you just don't get a good gut feel. And how do you say that to somebody? Or, when you have two people and they've got an equal skill set, but somebody's just more likable, so that's hard. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you, because I think it depends on who you're talking to, or who you're asking on, how comfortable they are or not to share the feedback. It's something I try to do the best I can, but I err on the side of caution as well, to be honest with you.
I was wondering, when a resume comes through from a referral or current employee at your company, do you prioritize those resumes?
We probably do, I would say, generally, because they're coming in through a different way. At least in our company, they come over with an employee referral form. And so there's somebody saying, hey, Michelle, a friend of mine or somebody I used to work with is applying for, is interested in this role. And so it's sort of just, it's at the top of the pile. And you do try to treat employee referrals a little bit differently, because you want to make sure that you're encouraging employees to continue to advocate for the company. We all like to work with people we like with, and sorry, I said that wrong. We all like to work with people we like. And, very often that's people you used to work with or friends. And so I think we end up seeing those resumes quicker than we would when we have 75 resumes and we have to scan through them one by one in a system. But that would be the answer there.
So someone said, as a follow-up, if you're changing careers, what should your resume look like?
I think you would need to just note on there what you're seeking, right? Like, professional seeking a career change in X, Y, and Z. Because if you have been an accountant for the last 10 years and now all of a sudden you're trying to make a change to sales, if you as an accountant apply to a sales role, I'm going to look at it and think, why is this accountant applying for a sales position? So I would be looking for something, again, that calls out why the change.
And I think if you have had like recent training or recent education, to put that right up at the top. So, put that above your most recent job history and say, and I just completed a course in web design, or, I just got this project management certification. So put it right in the front. So do that summary statement. And then if there's a new qualification or credential that you got that applies to the new role versus the old role, make that right up front.
I have a question about how should I answer a question around strengths and weaknesses?
Well, I think you want to accentuate your strengths. I'm a really hard worker. I'm dedicated. I'm loyal. I'm resourceful. And give examples. Examples are so important. We can all say a hypothetical. Well, if I get this job, here's what I'll do. But if you give an example of something you've done in the past, one of my strengths is being resourceful. And an example of this would be at my, a few years ago at this job, here's the situation and here's how I just sort of grabbed it. And I started through the process to make sure, I hit these different milestones. So giving examples is really important, especially when talking about strengths or trying to be able to, push, get the point across, I guess is what I'm saying. And on the weaknesses side, again, I think it's okay to be a little bit vulnerable. You don't want to go out there and say, first of all, I don't have any weaknesses. I'm perfect, because we all have things we could work on. And I'm listening to myself talk today and I'm thinking, I keep saying, and I'm like, okay, I probably need to work on my public speaking. It's been a while and I need to, figure out how I can not have those lulls and the things that pull it. So what are the things? You can say, I am interested to learn more about project management and I'm considering taking a PMP certification class, to help me with my PMP skills. Like, don't just have a problem, try to have a possible solution, right? Something I've been trying to work on is, taking myself outside of my little box of what I do. I'm trying to push myself outside the box. I just had this conversation with an employee yesterday. At our all hands, I always try to do an employee spotlight where any random employee just does 5 minutes on kind of whatever they want. It's a way for employees, remote and in other offices, to get to know their coworkers. And he came in and he said, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with this all hands. And I said, first of all, you don't have to. And he said, no, it's good. It's growth for me, right? It's taking me outside of my box. And I said, yes. I said, but don't stress over it, and we talked through it. So I think just, again, trying to have a little bit of a solution on the things that you want to work on. What are the things you want to work on? Everybody has personal and professional goals. And we have to chip away at those over time.
Well, thank you so much, ladies. This was wonderful. I'm so glad we had so many Q&A questions. I know there were still a couple more we didn't get to, but we're wrapping up here in a couple minutes and we'll go back to the floor. So find Shannon and Michelle. They'll be, let's say, at table number 2. So find them at table number 2, and they can answer questions for you. And I encourage networking. This was wonderful, and hopefully we got a lot of good tips for everybody out there, whether you're hiring or you're looking for another job, as well as just how to keep everybody engaged while you are all working remote right now. I'm going to share my screen again, everybody, and tell you, do a little wrap up here. There we go. So thank you again. This was wonderful. Really appreciate Michelle, Shannon. Thank you for all your professional insights. Very excited, everybody. Next month, March 9th, we are going back to in-person. woo, raise the roof. I'm so excited. We've heard your feedback. We've sent out surveys, but do not fret. Those of you who still want to be virtual, we are going to continue that as well. We are going to do an every other month cadence of in-person and virtual to meet the needs of all of our attendees. So check the Tech Alliance website for events, but back in person March 9th at the Manchester Country Club. That's where we always had met, and we will continue to be meeting same time, same back channel as far as 7:30 in the morning is registrations, and we kick off at 8 o'clock in person. We're going to have Dr. Kim Higney, founder and clinical director of Cardia Women's Health. And it's going to be a very interesting topic. She's going to talk about mood, minerals, and metabolism, the metals that make us, us. You'll learn simple ways to easily recognize which minerals your body may be missing and how they're affecting your mood and metabolism, what you can do about it. And she's going to talk about the tech tools that they use to identify those minerals. So I hope you all will join us in person. Obviously, the cadence of in-person virtual is subject to change, like everything now, but we're also flexible dealing with changes last minute. So I hope to see everybody there on March 9th. And with that, thank you for joining us. Thank you for getting up early again. I really appreciate it. There's a lot of you here that are regular attendees, and I thank you for that. I thank you, Rise, for being our sponsor. Please check them out. And then lastly, I wanted to say, I hope you're enjoying the Olympics. It's a lot of fun to watch on TV, as well as we got the Super Bowl this weekend, if you're football fans, and then Valentine's Day on Monday. So it's a busy week for everybody. So again, thank you. Have a wonderful week. I hope we met our mission of inspiring and being inspired. So go out, have a wonderful day. And thank you again, everybody.